So the purpose of this presentation is to set the record straight when it comes to the controversy surrounding the Bible and its prophecies and all the doctrines that have come along with it over the years. Even an agnostic person or atheistic person who wants to study more on the topic could find respect for this work as well. You know, if they're diligent enough to dive into the plot of the Torah from an unbiased, scholarly, and exegetically precise examination of the text. A person of any religion with its roots in Genesis will also have a good understanding and openness to exploring the basis of their set of beliefs. Although this is a neutral approach to Scripture, it will be yet stern when the points are clear and incontestable. Do the prophecies of the Bible sound like ancient riddles, like metaphorical spells that can only be known by divine revelation? Why does it seem to be so many different interpretations of the same paragraphs? By the end of this presentation, everyone will have a clear understanding of this book as if it were any other uncontroversial text. This will take time, as we will not be isolating phrases from different writings to enforce an interpolated agenda, ignoring the gist of its context. Please use this as a study guide and take notes. Write down any questions you have on these points that I'll jot down so we can have an educated Q&A session afterwards. But the context will essentially speak for itself. The scriptures in the Bible are oral traditions containing migration patterns, genealogies, war records, and customs like that of any indigenous culture, and should be respected as such before considering any other alternatives. What is distinctive about the indigenous people of this book, Torah, is that it says that they were instructed by the creator of the earth and chosen to be his holy nation. It begins with creation and follows down a patriarchal lineage of men who worship the creator from Seth to Abraham. This man Abraham was said to even be a friend of God. He left his own family to seek a place to worship the creator because they and everyone in the land worshiped images they had built of other gods. Abraham settles in a good land, and God reveals to him that he would give that land to his descendants forever as an inheritance to him. That they would grow to be a great nation. He also reveals to Abraham's sons the same thing, his son Isaac and then his son Jacob. For his inheritance, Jacob tricks his brother Esau and wrestles with God, having his name changed to Israel. And we will address Jacob as Israel for the sake of the plot of the story. Israel has 12 sons. Joseph, the youngest son, is sold by his older brothers into slavery because of jealousy for him and his favor from their father Jacob. But Joseph has favor with God also, and eventually becomes a great ruler in Egypt where his brothers had sold him. Their descendants grow exponentially there in Egypt, and the Egyptians begin to severely oppress them as they have forgotten to respect Joseph. But God remembers his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, also known as Israel. The children of Israel cry out because of the harsh oppression, and God raises up a savior for them. Moses, who was raised in the Egyptian military, is visited by God and told to go and command the king or Pharaoh of Egypt to release his people. Pharaoh grows more relentless with every plague God sends at him for not releasing them. Finally, he does let them go, and after God retaliates by killing every firstborn creature in the land except for those belonging to Israel. Relentless still, Pharaoh and his army go after the Israelites to destroy them. God causes a strong wind to blow on the sea and splits open the water for the Israelites. But the waters recede with the Egyptian army behind them and swallows up Pharaoh and his army. This is what most are familiar with as the Exodus. Okay? And from here, we'll study the plot of the Torah to elaborate more on this relationship with God and the descendants of Abraham, I have titled The Romance of Israel, which begins with the Exodus out of Egypt. We use that title because of familiarity. Okay? Okay, so we'll jot down some key components here on the board as we reveal points in the context that are important throughout the whole prophecy of the book and other prophecies. So we'll put them here so that they'll stay fresh in our minds as we go over and we look over this plot. All right? So before the children of Israel find themselves in Egypt, God had already told Abraham beforehand in Genesis 15, verse 13 through 21, he says to Abraham, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not complete. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." So when this finally takes place and it comes to fruition, God commands Moses and sends him to Pharaoh. But he says to Moses, "Surely I have seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites." Also here, Exodus chapter 6, verse 1. He said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will let them go, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land." And God spoke to Moses and said to him, "I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But my name, the Lord, I was not known to them. I have also established my covenant with them, to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage, in which they were strangers. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians keep in bondage. I have remembered my covenant. Therefore, say to the children of Israel, I am the Lord. I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rescue you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, and with great judgments. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I will give it to you as a heritage. I am the Lord. So here we see the first point that we need to bring out is that God is bringing Israel out of oppression to bring them into the land that he had promised their fathers. So that's what we're going to subtitle this first section here, the Exodus. God brings Israel out bondage to bring them into the land promised to their fathers. God brings Israel out of bondage to bring them into the land promised to their fathers. So this is the first gist of it, okay? So the relationship starts, God bringing Israel out of oppression with great power, splitting the sea, in order to bring them into the land promised to their fathers. Okay, since the sojourn of Abraham, the land was inhabited by other nations. And you can see if you look into the other genealogy records in accordance with the scripture, after Noah, it talks about the dividing of the lands of the sons of Noah. So you can see there that these nations were not supposed to be there because of their genealogy, the birthright. But it doesn't mention that here, but it does mention that he's bringing these nations out because he's driving these other nations out because they're utterly corrupt. Okay, and God would destroy them using Israel. He would assist Israel in destroying them so that Israel could settle in their place. So listen to what Moses tells them here in Deuteronomy 9, verse 1. Hear, O Israel, you are to cross over the Jordan today and go in and dispossess nations greater and mightier than yourself, cities great and fortified up to heaven, a people great and tall, the descendants of the Anakim, whom you know and whom you have heard it say, who can stand before the descendants of Anak? Therefore, understand today that the Lord your God is he who goes over before you as a consuming fire. He will destroy them and bring them down before you. So you shall drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord has said to you. Do not think in your heart after the Lord your God has cast them out before you, saying, because of my righteousness, the Lord has brought me in to possess this land. But it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out from before you. It is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart that you go in and possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God drives them out from before you, and that he may fulfill the word which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Therefore, understand that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess because of he's not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. So right there we see he's giving them the land, and he's driving out the other nations that are inhabiting that land because of their wickedness, not because of the righteousness of Israel, but because of the wickedness of these other nations. Because Israel is stiff-necked. So Moses goes on in verse 7, goes on to remind them about how they provoked him in the wilderness. They didn't listen to any of the commands that they were given in the wilderness. They all complained and groaned. They were hungry, they were thirsty. They complained against Moses. They complained against God. And he dealt with them. He wiped out the whole the group of elders in 40 years. He brought none of them in but Caleb and Joshua. Okay, he reminds them about how they had built the calf and worshiped a golden calf when Moses was up on the mountain fasting to bring them the laws. So he had to go back up to the mountain and fast again to bring the tablets because he broke them the first time when he saw them worshiping a golden calf. So he's reminding them about that. He's reminding them about their disobedience on the journey because he's letting them know, hey, you've been disobedient from the jump. You've always been disobedient. So it's not because of your obedience that you're going in, obviously. It's because of the wickedness of these other nations and because of the oath that he swore to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he reminds them here, verse 22, also at Taberah and Massa and Kibroth Hattava, you provoked the Lord to wrath. Likewise, when the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and possess the land which I have given you, then you rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God, and you did not believe him nor obey his voice. You have been rebellious against the Lord from the day that I knew you. Israel. Stiff-necked. Since day one. Israel's stiff-necked since day one. So ain't nothing that they did to get them in there. It was because of the other nations, the wickedness of the other nations, and his promise to their fathers that he's initially bringing them in. Okay. So when he's bringing them in, he's also telling them, drive out these other nations, drive out any remnant of these other nations, any of their customs, any of their gods. All right. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1. Listen to what he says. When the Lord your God, this is Moses speaking to Israel, the congregation. When the Lord your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast out many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them, nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son, for they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. So the anger of the Lord will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly. But thus you shall deal with them. You shall destroy their altars, break down their sacred pillars, and cut down their wooden images. Burn their carved images with fire. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples on the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you, nor choose you because you were more in number than any other people, for you were the least of all peoples. But because the Lord loves you, and because he would keep the oath which he swore to your fathers, the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he restates this point down here in verse 22. And the Lord your God will drive out these nations before you, little by little. You will be unable to destroy them at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. But the Lord your God will deliver them over to you, and will inflict defeat upon them until they are destroyed. And he will deliver their kings into your hand. You will destroy their name from under heaven. No one shall be able to stand against you until you have destroyed them. Here it is again. You shall burn the carved images of their gods with fire. You shall not covet the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, lest you be snared by it, for it is an abomination to the Lord your God. Nor shall you bring an abomination into your house, lest you be doomed to destruction like it. You shall utterly detest and utterly abhor it, for it is an accursed thing. So he's telling them, go into the nations, wipe out everything. Get rid of their gods, burn it, don't take it for yourselves, don't want it for yourselves, because it'll be a snare to you. It'll be a stumbling block. It'll keep you from serving your God. And he says, make no marriages with them. So they're taught not to assimilate with these other nations at all, take on any of their customs, and not to intermarry with them, because it would turn them away. Here it is again, chapter 12, This is a crucial point. These are the statutes and judgments which you shall be careful to observe in the land which the Lord your God is of your fathers is giving you to possess. All the days that you live on the earth, you shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations which you shall dispossess serve their gods, on the high mountains, on the hills, and under every green tree. You shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, burn their wooden images with fire. You shall cut down the carved images of their gods and destroy their names from that place. You shall not worship the Lord your God with such things. Verse 29, when the Lord your God cuts off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you displace them and dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? I will also do likewise. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way. For every abomination to the Lord which he hates, they have done to their gods. For they burn even their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. Whatever I command you, be careful to observe it. You shall not add to it, nor take away from it. So he's telling them that he's being very strict. Okay, so he's laid it all out. Don't add to it or take away. Everything that he's commanding them, he's telling them that there's no need for additions, for addendums, or subtractions. Okay, there's no need to take away or add to it. So go in, dispossess the land, wipe out everything, burn their gods, their carved images, get rid of them. Don't bring it into your house. Don't intermarry. All right. So he's making that plain and simple. So that is another crucial point that we might add. God drives out mightier nations from before them. Along with their gods. And I'm going to slash customs, because that came along with their worship. Their customs came along with their worship, just like he said, drive out the nations and any remembrance of them, don't intermarry. All their customs come along with the way that they worship their God, just like Israel's getting accustomed to right now. The form of worship that God is wanting to set up for them. He has to tear down the other nations and their form of worship and their gods and totally eradicate it from the land in order for Israel to come and set up the place of worship the way God intended. So Moses repeats this several times. It's a crucial point in their mission. They needed to totally eradicate any idea or image of the gods of these other nations and their culture and set up for worship for the way the Creator intended. They received those worship customs as Moses explains all of God's commandments, laws, and statutes to them. He opens up by instructing them in Deuteronomy 4 not to add or take away anything from those laws, as we read, reminding them of the elders they lost on their journey through the wilderness. He reminds them of how they heard the voice of God to warn them and teach them of the essence of idolatry. So he teaches them what idolatry actually means. Deuteronomy 4, verse 15. Take careful heed to yourselves, for you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, or the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, or the likeness of any fish that is in the water beneath the earth. And take heed, lest you lift up your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under the whole heaven as a heritage. But the Lord has taken you out and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people, his inheritance. as you are this day. So he's teaching them about idolatry. He teaches them that they saw no form when God spoke to them from out of the midst of the fire over the mountain. They just heard a voice. So there was no image. So he reminds them of that to tell them not to worship any other gods, and which would come in these other images, the likeness of male or female or creature or one of the lights in the sky. Okay. All right, in verse 36, he's also going to tell them that by keeping the commandments he's about to teach them, it will preserve them in the land of their fathers for all time. Let's go to verse 36. Out of heaven he let you hear his voice, that he might instruct you. On earth he showed you his great fire. You heard his words out of the midst of the fire, and because he loved you, he loved your fathers. Therefore he chose their descendants after them. And he brought you out of Egypt with his presence, with his mighty power, driving out nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in, to give you their land as an inheritance, as it is this day. Know therefore and consider it in your heart, that the Lord himself is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath. There is no other. You shall therefore keep his statutes and commandments, which I command you today. Why? That it may go well with you and with your children after you, that you may prolong your days in the land which the Lord your God is giving you for all time. Okay, that's a crucial point. He's telling them that it will preserve them in the land. And he repeats this over and over, that the laws are there to preserve them, prosper them, multiply them in the land which he's giving them. Deuteronomy 5, verse 32, he's repeating it. Be careful to do all that the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. There it is again. Don't add or take away. Don't turn aside to the right or to the left. Don't deviate, he says. Okay, so that you may live, that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you go to possess. So the commandments are there to keep them alive, help them thrive, prolong their days, go well with them. And it says in chapter 6, when your sons ask you in time to come, what's the meaning of the testimonies, statutes, and judgments which the Lord your God has commanded you? Say to your son, we were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand, and the Lord showed signs and wonders before our eyes, great and severe, against Egypt, Pharaoh, and all his household. Then he brought us out from there, that he may bring us in, give us the land which he swore to our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is this day. Then it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all these commandments before the Lord our God as he commanded us. So their righteousness comes from keeping the commandments. Their health, their preservation in the land which they're going to possess is contingent upon them keeping the commandments. Okay? And we see that again in Deuteronomy chapter 11. Okay? That you may prolong your days in the land which he swore to your fathers. Okay? He tells them again that it's not like the land they're coming from, where they had to sit there and toil the ground and to get their vegetables to grow. Said that he cares on the eyes of God are on the land always, and he cares for the land. So he's giving them a better land, okay? And if they earnestly obey the commandments, which he commands them today, all the commandments which he's getting ready to teach them, to love the Lord their God and serve him with all their heart and with all their soul. And he'll give them rain in the season, the early rain and the latter rain, for their grain and their new wine and oil. Grass in the field, livestock will eat and be filled. But he says, take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be deceived, and you turn aside to serve other gods and worship them, lest the Lord's anger be aroused against you, and he shut up the heavens that there may be no rain, and the land yield no produce, and you perish quickly from the good land which the Lord is giving you. So keeping the commandments, he would bless them with all their necessities. And when not keeping the commandments, he would not give them the blessings. He would withhold the rain. Chapter 8. He's going to elaborate more on it. Okay. The warning is, I'm in verse 11 of chapter 8. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied because of the blessings that he's given them. When your heart is lifted up and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and terrible wilderness, in which were fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and that he might test you to do you good in the end. Then you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for he is he who gives you the power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. Then it shall be, if you by any means forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and serve them and worship them, I testify against you this day that you shall surely perish. As the nations which the Lord destroys before you, so you shall perish, because you would not be obedient to the voice of the Lord your God. So the warning is that just like he's giving them blessings and bringing them into the land to possess the land of their fathers, and he's giving them blessings to remain and preserve them in the land and keep them in the land, if they disobey the commandments, then he will do the opposite. And it'll be just like the nations that he's driving out from before them. So just like he's driving out the nations from before them, he will do the same to Israel if they do not keep the commandments. He says, as the nations which the Lord destroys before you, so you shall perish, because you would not be obedient to the voice of the Lord your God. So just like he drove out the other nations, what did they do? They came in there and wiped out everything, all the remnant of them, dispossessed them. He said that would happen with them. Okay? Just as he expelled those other nations, it would expel Israel. So Moses also elaborates on this in Deuteronomy 28. He elaborates on the blessings that they will have, and then he elaborates on the curses that they will have for not keeping the commandments. That would be eventually another nation coming in just as they did and dispelling them from the land, bringing on them curses and plagues and judgment, just like he judged these other nations from before him. And that is elaborated on in Deuteronomy 28. The other nations would come in and invade them, overthrow them, and eventually they would scatter them around the world. So that is the extent of the curses that they would receive for being disobedient to the commandments. Check out Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 24. He tells them that in this scattering and part of this judgment, all the nations would say, why has the Lord done so to this land? What does the heat of this great anger mean? Then people would say, because they have forsaken the covenant of the Lord their God, of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. For they went and served other gods and worshiped them, gods that they did not know and that he had not given to them. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against this land to bring on it every curse that is written in this book. And the Lord uprooted them from their land in anger and wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land as it is this day. So that land would be bare and desolate, because he uprooted them from their land, cast them into another land. Also, Leviticus chapter 26, he stresses this point again. God says, I will bring the land to desolation, and your enemies who dwell in it shall be astonished at it. I will scatter you among the nations and draw out a sword after you. Your land shall be desolate and your cities waste. Then the land shall enjoy its Sabbaths as long as it lies desolate, and you are in your enemy's land. Then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate, it shall rest, for the time it did not rest on your Sabbaths when you dwelled in it. So he's telling them that they're not going to adhere to the Sabbath commandments the way they're supposed to. And when he scatters them, if they don't obey the commandments and they become scattered, the land will be desolate. It'll be empty of them. And it will enjoy Sabbath because it did not get to enjoy them when they were there because they didn't keep them. But even at the extent of the curses and total expulsion, God will show them mercy if they return to him and keep his commandments. He says in Deuteronomy 4, verse 25, when you beget children and grandchildren and have grown old in the land and act corruptly and make a carved image in the form of anything and do evil in the sight of the Lord your God to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that you will soon utterly perish from the land which you cross over the Jordan to possess. You will not prolong your days in it, but will be utterly destroyed. See the opposite? And the Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where the Lord will drive you. And there you will serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. When you are in distress, and all these things come upon you in the latter days, when you turn to the Lord your God and obey his voice, for the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them. So he's saying, even if you get to the point where you've been totally scattered, you're few in number, you're taken captive by all these nations and brought to different parts of the world, even then, he says, if you return and obey his voice, he will not forget his covenant. He will remember his covenant. So what will he do? Continue on to Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1. Now it shall come to pass when all these things come upon you, the blessings and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord your God drives you, and you return to the Lord your God and obey his voice according to all that I command you today, you and your children with all your heart and with all your soul, that the Lord your God will bring you back from captivity and have compassion on you, and gather you again from all the nations where the Lord your God has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under heaven, from there the Lord your God will gather you. From there he will bring you. Then the Lord your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. He will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. And the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. So he's telling them right there, when all these things come upon you and you realize the blessings and the curses and all the places that you've been scattered, where all the Israelites have been scattered, okay, where he drives them out to serve other gods and to serve the gods of their enemies. From there, they will seek God and find him if they seek him with their whole heart. So it says, when all these things come upon them, the Israelites, the blessings and the curses, which are written in the book that they read, that we saw in Deuteronomy 28, and they return and obey his voice according to all that they were commanded that day. So the Israelites, even being totally scattered, when they realize that all these blessings and curses have come upon them in the latter days, and they return according to all that they were commanded, meaning that they go and they keep the commandments that they were commanded originally in this text that we're reading, that God will cause them to be gathered up in order to bring them back into the land. Okay, so they came in the first time from Egypt. And if they become utterly corrupt and he scatters them and they're all over the world and they're worshiping other gods, still they can return to him by keeping the commandments that they were commanded that day. And he will gather them up and bring them back into the land of their fathers. And he will circumcise their hearts this time, it says. Okay? The Lord your God will bring you to the land which your fathers possessed. You will possess it. He will prosper you, multiply you more than your fathers. So he'll bless them even more than their fathers were blessed. And he will circumcise their hearts and the hearts of their descendants to love the Lord their God with all their heart and their soul, that they may live. And you will again obey the voice of the Lord your God and do all his commandments, which I command you today. So, once again, he's going to flip the script. So, he brings them in, drives out the other nations that are mightier than them from before them, along with their gods. And if Israel continues to transgress and break the covenant and worship other gods, then he drives them out, just like he drove out those nations. And then once he drives them out and scatters them all around the world, and Israel still has a chance to wake up and go back to those commandments that they were commanded that day. And then he'll gather them up again, bring them into the land. But at that point, after he would have scattered them and brought them into the land from all the places where he scattered them, this time he will circumcise their hearts to be obedient to him. Their hearts, the hearts of their descendants. So that means he's going to fix Israel. If he has to scatter them all around the world and bring them as captives to other parts of the world to where they're subject to their enemies and they're serving their gods, this time when he brings them in, he'll gather them from all the places that they were scattered. But this time he will circumcise their hearts, fix their hearts so that they will serve him, them and their descendants after them. So that will be forever. Okay? And he's going to put all the curses on their enemies. All the enemies that persecuted them. All the enemies that took them captive. So that's the motif of the story. He judges the other nations for their wickedness, giving the land that he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to their descendants. And when he gives it to them, he gives them the stipulations of the law. When they don't keep the law, he scatters them by the hand of the Gentiles. And those same Gentiles that he used to scatter them, to bring the curses on them, he'll bring judgment on those Gentiles when he gathers Israel and brings them out and brings them into their land and circumcises their hearts. He will also judge those other nations. Okay, the Lord your God will make you abound in the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, in the increase of your livestock, and in the produce of your land for good. For the Lord will again rejoice over you, as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you obey the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments, his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, and if you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Bring them back into the land. So that's what he says. All right. This time he'll fix their hearts to obey him, and then they'll obey him forever. Their hearts will be fixed. Their hearts of their descendants will be fixed, and then he'll bless them more than their fathers, multiply them more than their ancestors. All right. So Moses, he doesn't just lay this out as a chain of events as a contingency, but he begins to tell them that these things will eventually take place. These things will happen. Okay. And he doesn't predict it on his own. God tells Moses this. So the Lord said to Moses, behold, the days approach when you must die. So Moses is getting ready to die. He's getting ready to inaugurate Joshua, the next up. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, you will rest with your fathers, and this people will rise and play the harlot with the gods of the foreigners of the land, where they go to be among them. And they will forsake me and break my covenant, which I have made with them. So he's saying they're going to go into the land and they will break the covenant, just as we went over, just with all these points we went over. Go bring them into the land. Well, we know they were stiff-necked since day one, so shouldn't be surprised. So all these things that Moses is telling them not to worship these other gods, and he teaches them the essence of idolatry and tells them not to take on these customs and not to intermarry and to destroy all their idols, and all these commandments that he's given them, all these forewarnings that he's given them that we went over, and some more in there that we didn't even touch. But we got enough out to show the gist of what Moses repeatedly told them when they were going into the land. But God tells Moses they're not going to do that. He tells them that they're going to break the covenant. They're going to forsake him. Okay? And they're going to serve the gods of the foreigners of the land which they're going in to possess. Then he says to Moses, my anger shall be aroused against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured. Many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, have not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day, because of all the evil which they have done, and that they have turned to other gods. He's telling them this will happen. So Moses prophesies about the nation of Israel. He tells them their future. All these things will happen. The curses will come upon them because they're going to forsake the covenant, just like it warns them not to. So everything that we read in the curses will take place. They will be scattered. Okay? And God will hide his face from them. So since we know that this is going to happen with Israel, let's just go ahead and talk about the next point in the romance. Expulsion. God expels Israel from the land, just like he said. Just like he told them, if you disobey these commandments, I will drive you out of the land just like I drove these other nations out from before you. So subtitle of this expulsion is Israel breaks covenant. And is scattered. Scattered from the land promised to their fathers. I have to spell that out because that's an important concept. This land was promised to their fathers. God told them that he's bringing them into the land because of the promise that he swore to their fathers, not because of their righteousness, because they're stiff-necked. He's bringing them into the land. He's driving out nations mightier from before them, along with their gods and their customs, because of the promise that he made with their fathers. So the Exodus is bringing them into the land promised to their fathers. But eventually we see Moses prophesied that they will be expelled from the land. When they break the covenant, they're going to break the covenant. And they will be scattered from the land promised to their fathers. That's the next theme. That's the next point in what happens to Israel in the romance. They're expelled from the land because they weren't obedient. So God tells Moses, I'm going to hide my face from them. Let's go ahead and write that down. because it gets ugly, man. This is where it's ugly. God showed his favor to Israel by them keeping the commandments. Well, they didn't keep the commandments. He scatters them and he hides his face. They don't have his favor. They lose the blessings of God and his favor. God hides his face. Turns away from him. Yep. He turns away from him. He hides his face from him. Okay? And by him hiding his face, many evils and troubles will befall them, just like it says in the curses. Okay, so he tells Moses, therefore, write down this song for yourselves and teach it to the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. When I have brought them to the land flowing with milk and honey, of which I swore to their fathers, and they have eaten and filled themselves and grown fat, that they will turn to other gods and serve them, and they will provoke me. They will break my covenant. Then it shall be, when many evils and troubles have come upon them, that this song will testify against them as a witness, for it will not be forgotten in the mouths of their descendants. For I know the inclination of their behavior today, even before I have brought them to the land which I swore to give them. Therefore Moses wrote this song the same day and taught it to the children of Israel. Then he inaugurated Joshua the son of Nun and said, be strong and of good courage, for you shall bring the children of Israel into the land which I swore to them, and I will be with you. So it was, when Moses had completed writing the words of this law in a book, when they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, take this book of the law and put it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there as a witness against you. For I know your rebellion, your stiff neck. If today, while I am yet alive with you, you have been rebellious against the Lord, then how much more after my death? Gather to me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their hearing, and call heaven and earth to witness against them. For I know that after my death you will become utterly corrupt, and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you. And evil will befall you in the latter days, because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger through the works of your hands. So Moses is getting ready to sing them a song. So this song will always be in their possession. When they do break the covenant and they are scattered, they will always have something in their possession to see that they are supposed to return to those laws that they were commanded that day. They're always going to have something in their possession to guide them to come back to the laws. That was what he promised them. But since we know all these things are going to take place with Israel, and we've seen Moses basically spell out the blessings and the curses and what will happen to them in Deuteronomy 30 when they return to the covenant, that they'll be gathered together and they'll be brought back into the land promised to their fathers. And then God will circumcise their hearts and the hearts of their descendants to obey him forever, for their good always. That basically spells out the whole story. That is the romance of Israel. And just like he said, don't add to it or take away, we're not adding anything to it or taking anything away either. That's exactly what he told them. Those things will take place. Those things will happen. And when they do, and you see the blessings and curses, and you say, have these evils and troubles come upon us because our God is not among us? Because he's hidden his face. So he says he'll hide his face, and they'll wonder, what's going on? Is it because our God isn't among us? But they'll have the book of the law in their possession to teach them what to do to turn back, and then he'll gather them up. Am I repeating myself too much? Well, So what I'm here to show you is what the scripture does. It's very repetitive. Just like Moses continued to repeat himself to the Israelites and repeat this theme over and over, the blessings and the curses, we know that these things will take place. So the last part of the romance is the exoneration of Israel, or the salvation of Israel, when Israel returns to the covenant and God causes them to be gathered up and brings them back into the land in which he swore to their fathers. That will happen. So that's the end of the romance. It says Israel recognizes their offense. Israel recognizes their offense, returns to the covenant that they broke, return to the covenant, and then gathered and brought back into land promised to their fathers. That's the last thing that takes place in the romance of Israel. And God circumcises their hearts to obey his commandments forever. So we've got some more points in here that we were able to pull out, some nuggets from what Moses said to him. Okay. They're given laws to preserve, prosper in the land. They're given laws to preserve and prosper in the land promised to their fathers. And then we see Israel and their expulsion. We're just going to say scattered. They're taken captive and scattered around the world. God hides his face. So he puts the book of the law next to the Ark of the Covenant, and he says that this will always be in their possession, so that they will return to the covenant. So it implies that in their total expulsion and being scattered, that they would forget the covenant, or they would forget their inheritance that they had. So the part of the expulsion they'll say Israel forgets. Who they are. Now I'm putting down these points because they're briefly covered in the words of Moses, what Moses taught them. But so they're briefly covered there, but when we begin to go and we look at the other prophets and what they're saying, they draw out more points that reiterate what Moses is saying, and we'll get there. But I'm putting these points down here because I'm going to keep them up as we go, and we go into these other prophets so that we see how this all comes to fruition. But we were already told by Moses that these things would happen. Well, we're here in the Exodus. He's bringing them out. Okay. And he's telling them about their future. Moses tells them about the fact that they'll be expelled. And then later on, they'll be exonerated. They'll be saved and gathered up from all the places that they were expelled into. So in Deuteronomy 32, Moses sings them a song. This is a song that he puts in their possession to remember. And we're going to read through this song because this is very important to understand the context of what's being said, how Moses lays this whole romance story out from start to finish. And the other prophets will come through and they'll mimic it. Deuteronomy 32. Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching drop as rain, my speech distill as the dew, as raindrops on the tender herb, and as showers on the grass. For I proclaim the name of the Lord. Ascribe greatness to our God. He is the rock. His work is perfect. For all his ways are justice, a God of truth and without injustice. Righteous and upright is he. They have corrupted themselves. They are not his children because of their blemish, a perverse and crooked generation. Do you thus deal with the Lord, O foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father who begot you? Has he not made you and established you? Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the place of his inheritance. He found him in a desert land, and in the wasteland, a howling wilderness. He encircled him. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirs up its nest, hovers over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up, carrying them on its wings. So the Lord alone led him, and there was no foreign God with him. He made him ride in the heights of the earth, that he might eat the produce of the fields. He made him draw honey from the rock, and oil from the flinty rock, curds from the cattle, and milk of the flock, with fat of lambs and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the choicest wheat. And you drank wine, the blood of grapes. But Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, you grew thick, you are obese. Then he forsook God who made him, and scornfully esteemed the rock of his salvation. They provoked him to jealousy with foreign gods. With abominations they provoked him to anger. They sacrificed to demons, not to God, to gods they did not know, to new gods, new arrivals that your fathers did not fear. Of the rock who begot you, you are unmindful and have forgotten the God who fathers you. So Israel serves foreign gods. That's what Moses is saying. He did all this for you. He saved you out from the bondage of the Egyptians, from Pharaoh, from the house of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and fed you and gave you water and kept you alive through a wilderness and brought you into this great land to possess. But you grew fat. They were spoiled. They were spoiled and got the big head. And he already warned them that they would do that. Deuteronomy 8, verse 11, beware that you don't forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, his statutes, which I command you today, lest when you have eaten and are full and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, all that you have is multiplied, and your heart's lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and terrible wilderness, in which were fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought you water out of a flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you, that he might test you and do you good in the end. And you say in your heart, my power and my might have gained this wealth. He already warned them. Don't forget the Lord your God, because it's he who gives you power to get wealth. So we see Israel gets the big head. Israel gets the big head. Forgets God to serve idols. That's what they're going to do. They're going to get the big head and they're going to serve other gods. Why? Because he blessed them. He blessed them too much, man. He gave them too much stuff. And they thought it was them that did it. He already told them it's not because of your righteousness, it's because of their wickedness. So be careful. Don't be wicked like them and take on their gods, or I'm going to drive you out just like I did them. They ain't listen, obviously, because we see what's getting ready to happen. Get the big head, they serve other gods. It's like he said in here, you grew fat, you grew thick, you're obese. Then he forsook God who made him. You see how Moses is talking about Israel like he's calling them a man, and like he's calling them Jacob. He's personifying Israel as one man. He forsook him, Jeshurun, grew fat. So he's referring to Israel as, well, Jacob, because that's where the name came from. So when he's talking to the congregation, when he's talking to the nation of Israel, he refers to them as him or Jacob or Jeshurun. And we see the other prophets do the same, giving them, calling them Judah, or we'll get into that. But Israel is being personified as one man, and also they. But we see the context because we know what he's talking about. They provoked him to jealousy with foreign gods. With abominations, they provoked him to anger. They sacrificed to demons, not to God. Okay, the rock who begot them, they were unmindful. And when the Lord saw it, he spurned them because of the provocation of his sons and daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be. For they are a perverse generation, children in whom there is no faith. I will hide my face from them. See their end. I will see what their end will be. Well, I mean, he's going to hide his face. I mean, he ain't going to deal with them. He's not going to bless them. He's not going to do anything for them. We'll just let them see what's going to happen with them. I will see what their end will be. You know, just like when you got a disobedient child and you want them to bump their head. Like, okay, go ahead. We'll see. That's what he's saying. Well, I'm not going to help you out anymore. I'm going to turn the other way. I'm going to turn my back on you. I turn my face from you. Not even, go ahead. Go ahead, do what you want to do. That's what he said. Okay, I'll see what their end will be. They're a perverse generation, children in whom is no faith. They have provoked me to jealousy by what is not God. They have moved me to anger by their foolish idols, but I will provoke them to jealousy by those who are not a nation. I will move them to anger by a foolish nation. For a fire is kindled in my anger and shall burn in the lowest hell. It shall consume the earth with their incense, with their increase. and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. I will heap disasters on them. I will spin my arrows on them. They shall be wasted with hunger, devoured by pestilence and bitter destruction. Deuteronomy 28. I will send against them the teeth of beasts, with the poison of the serpents of the dust. The sword shall destroy outside. There shall be terror within. For the young man and virgin, the nursing child, and the man of his gray hairs. Golly. A fire is kindled in my anger. So what did he say? They provoke me to jealousy by what is not God. To get the big head, serve other gods. Okay. So because they provoked him to anger, he said, I'll provoke them to anger by a foolish nation. Okay. Israel invaded by foreigners. He said, you going to hassle me by not keeping my commandments? I'm going to hassle you by bringing these other nations on you. They provoke me to jealousy by what is not God. They have moved me to anger by their foolish idols, but I will provoke them to jealousy by those who are not a nation. I will move them to anger by a foolish nation. So if you're going to break my heart, I'll break yours. With a foolish nation. All right. And he says he's not going to show any mercy on him. Wasted with hunger, devoured by pestilence, all the curses for the young man and the old. And then he goes on to say, verse 26, I would have said, I will dash them in pieces. I will make the memory of them to cease from among men. He said, I would have said, I'll take you all the way out. I will make the memory of you to decease from among men. But had I not feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should misunderstand, lest they should say, our hand is high, and it is not the Lord who has done all this. I would do all the way away with you. He said, I would destroy you, dash you into pieces, and make the memory of you cease from among men. But because I feared the wrath of the enemy might say, they did it. And he made a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But he said, lest they should say our hand is high, is not the Lord who has done all this, because they are a nation void of counsel, nor is there any understanding in them. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. How could one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them and the Lord has surrendered them? So he's saying these nations, they're so stupid. These nations that he's invading Israel with, they're so stupid and ignorant. They don't even realize that this nation that they came and they devastated, that they invaded and scattered, they were only able to do that because their rock sold them, because God cursed them and allowed that to happen. So it's God doing these things. It's not the other nations. So just like Israel goes in and possesses the land, not because of their righteousness, because of the wickedness of the other nations, so will Israel's invaders come and invade them, not because of the righteousness of these other nations, of course, because these other nations aren't even keeping the laws. So it's not because of their righteousness either. God's doing this because of wickedness. He's driving out Israel because of their wickedness. And these other nations are confused. They think it was because they're just mighty like that. Like, it's not because, how could one man put so many other men to flight? Well, that's part of the curses. And they don't even know that. They're devoid of counsel. How could one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them and the Lord had surrendered them? For their rock is not like our rocks, even our enemies themselves being judges. For their vine is the vine of Sodom, and their grapes and the fields of their grapes are grapes of gall. Their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of serpents and the cruel venom of cobras. Is it not laid up in store with me, sealed up among my treasures? Vengeance is mine and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things come hasten upon them. For the Lord will judge his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees that their power is gone and there is no one remaining bond or free. He will say, where are their gods, the rock in which they have sought refuge, who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offering? Let them rise and help you and be your refuge. Now see that I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill and I make alive, I wound and I heal. Nor is there any who can deliver from my hand. For I raise my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever, if I whet my glittering sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to my enemies. I will repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh. With the blood of the slain and the captives from the heads of the leaders of the enemy, rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants and render vengeance to his adversaries. He will provide atonement for his land and his people. Okay, so Moses came with Joshua, the son of Nun, and spoke all the words of this song in the hearing of the people. Moses finished speaking all these words to all Israel, and he said to them, set your hearts on all the words with which I testify among you today, which you shall command your children to be careful to observe all the words of this law, for it is not a futile thing for you, because it is your life. And by this word you shall prolong your days in the land which you cross over to possess. You cross over the Jordan to possess. It's not a futile thing, man. It's to preserve the life of Israel, he tells them. So at the end, he tells them that this nation, these nations that come in and scatter Israel, invade them, they get the big head too. Everybody getting the big head. They think they doing this on their own. He said, no, man, y'all confused. You're foolish. Even your grapes, your wine is the wine of Sodom, and your fields of grapes are the grapes of Gomorrah. He's saying that these other nations are just as daggone wicked. They're wicked. And they think that they're destroying Israel, dispossessing the land because of their strength, or they're mightier than this nation. God's like, no. Nope. Is it not laid up in store with me, sealed among my treasures? Vengeance is mine and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things to come hasten upon them. So, what did he tell them in Deuteronomy 30? He said he'll put all the curses on their enemies and those who persecuted them. So, God judges their enemies. And doesn't it sound like the same judgment that he gives Israel? Because they got the big head, because they thought that land just belonged to them because of something they did. And he has to tell them, no, not because of something you did. I can't spell. It ain't because of something you did, because of the promise that I made with your fathers. And so the fact still remains. It's because of the promise that he made with their fathers. He didn't make the promise with the foreign nations. So when they come in and it's time to get rid of them for being wicked, he's going to judge them, drive them out to bring Israel back. When he brings them back, he's going to bring them back and drive out those nations. But he's not going to keep a remnant of them alive and bring them back anywhere, because he didn't make a promise with them. He's going to judge those foreign nations that persecuted Israel. God judges their enemies when he brings them out. But they were only able to do what they did because Israel was wicked and God was dealing with them in that way. But we know that Israel recognizes their offense in the latter days, returns to the covenant, and they're gathered, brought back into the land promised to their fathers. So he's going to get rid of these other nations, get them out. The same nations that he used to judge Israel, to scatter them, he's going to bring judgment on those nations. Their foot shall slip in due time, and vengeance belongs to him. So that's what that song pretty much sums up. The Song of Moses is the romance of Israel. He told him he brought him out of bondage. He encircled him and he kept him as the apple of his eye and blessed him. But they broke the covenant. Jeshurun grew fat. He kicked. He's obese. He worshiped other gods. Oh no. So he dealt with them. Scattered them. Brought all these judgments on them. But in the latter days, Israel will have this romance. They'll have the Song of Moses. They'll have the laws, and they'll see what it will take to get back. They're going to be like, didn't all this happen because our God is not among us? And they'll have the book of the law to testify against them. Something to revert back to. And then he's going to bring them back into the land promised to their fathers, circumcise their hearts. Let's add that on there. This is what happens in the exoneration. God circumcises their hearts. To keep his covenant. He didn't do that the first time. He spoke with them out of the fire, out of the midst of the fire on the mountain, and they heard his voice. And they didn't really like the sound of that. They said, "Do people hear the voice of God and still live? We don't want to hear that anymore. We don't want to hear that ever again. Moses, you go listen and you tell us what he said." And he said, "Oh, that they would have a heart in them, that they would always fear me and obey my commandments for their good always." That's why they didn't want to hear it. They didn't have a heart to hear it. But this time he said, after they have been scattered and he brings them back, he will circumcise their hearts to obey his commandments, and the heart of their descendants to obey his commandments. So when he brings them back into the land, that's it. And he circumcises their hearts. That's it. That's the end of it. So he's not gonna have to instruct them the same way. He's gonna, this time, instead of letting them hear their voice, letting them hear his voice in the fire, he's just gonna go ahead and fix them. He will fix them to obey his commandments forever. Okay? And that pretty much covers it. That is the romance of Israel in a nutshell. So everything has been spelled out. It's been prophesied from beginning to end by Moses. Well, Moses already spelled it out. Moses has already brought them out. He came out with them. Okay, and we saw what happened in the Exodus. And then we see in the future, he told them they're going to be expelled by not keeping the commandments. And then in the latter days, they're going to be forgiven, exonerated. When they recognize their offense, return to the covenant, they're going to be brought back. God's going to judge their enemies. He's going to circumcise the hearts of the Israelites to obey his commandments and their descendants after them. And that ends it. Since Moses prophesies the entire saga of Israel, the law is a template for understanding the rest of the prophets.
It's there for those who want to learn. the world.